Hi everyone, this is Long Vo. Today I'm analyzing one of my games on July the 10th, 2012 in the Burlington Chess Club. Today I'm playing black. I'm currently rated 1498. My opponent is Larry Papa, playing white, rated 1638. So he goes e4. And I like the French defense, so I go e6. He goes knight to f3, and I go d5. So now he takes, e takes d, and e takes d. Then he goes d4. So my next move is f6 because I thought that I would put some pressure towards the center, perhaps with the c5 eventually, but I did want to add protection to the d pawn. So bishop to d3, getting ready to castle, I suppose, and bishop to d6. So the idea here is to get ready to attack towards the king side, because I thought that he would get ready to castle, and h3, I guess, preventing the light squared bishop from pinning the knight. So castles, and knight to c3, attacking the d pawn. So my next move here is knight to d7, preparing for the c5 here, and even though I was blocking the light squared bishop, this knight wasn't going to stay there for long. So now he plays a move that kind of surprised me. So he went knight to e2. So I suppose he develops his knight here, and the next step would be to launch an attack towards my king side, since I already castled, so he knows where the king is going. And so now I launch my attack because I didn't want to wait any longer, because once that knight was being transferred towards the king side, I knew I had to counter in the center. So c5, and he defends with c3. So the idea here is to have him capture me instead of me going to him. And he has too many defenders anyways. So I decide to apply more pressure by the idea here was to move my pawns here, fianchettoing my bishop to add more pressure to the diagonal, and perhaps bring the rook in, and the queen here to support this pawn. And the more pressure I add, I feel that eventually he'll have to take the c pawn. So he castles short. So now I push for b5, and I guess this is where he starts to feel the pressure. So d takes c, and knight takes c5, freeing the bishop, and also attacking his light squared bishop. So bishop retreats to c2, queen to c7, with the idea of furthering the development to connect the rooks, and also applying a little bit of pressure over here, even though the knight is there. So the plan is to eventually do something about that knight. Then he pins my knight with bishop to g5. So at this point, I should have been a little bit more careful, perhaps retreating the knight or something like that, because he's focusing a lot of his pieces towards my king side, and all my pieces are on the queen side. And even though I could launch some sort of an attack here, his attack will be more powerful because that's where my king is. And at this point, I knew that he could, once he takes the knight, it would really disrupt my defense here. But I thought that because now my bishops have pretty good diagonals here, and if I somehow tempt him to exchange the bishop for the knight, then I would still have my bishop pair and find a way to bring my pieces back for defense. So I go bishop to b7, knowing that his next move is probably to exchange the knight. So bishop takes f6, g takes f6. So I don't know if this move was a mistake, but I felt okay playing it, knowing that he would double the pawns and weaken my king side. But I was confident that my pieces were developed enough that I could somehow bring them back. So queen to d4, centralizing the queen, with the threat here is queen to h4, and then eventually checkmating the king. And so this is where I start to feel some pressure, because I knew that there was no quick way of getting my queen back for defense. This bishop is, it's really the light squared bishop that I need, right, to counter his light squares. And I thought about what happened if I did bishop here. Then he could still go queen to h4, and that would I don't see how I could block that. And there was the option of rook to e8, freeing some room for my king, and attacking the knight. So I don't think he would have played this, because then I would take the rook, and he could chase the king around, but I do have an opening here, and the rook is protected by the bishop. However, I felt that what if after I go the rook there, then he could somehow bring the knights in slowly. So once he moves the knight, then what, right? So the threat is still there, and then now he controls this key square here, because my last move was to bring my knight to e4 to block the queen, and if he does exchange, then that's fine. And that was the plan, right? So that's what I chose, and I thought that was the best move, even though and also protecting this pawn as well, right? So he bishop takes e4, and d takes e4. So I successfully blocked the queen. Now my pawn on f6 is hanging, so he didn't take it though, because I guess, let me go back here. So, well, obviously because the knight is being attacked, right? So the only move that he had for the knight was h4, and so now my pawn here is hanging, but I felt a lot of pressure there, because his knight is very, very strong, and I didn't want him to add any more attackers, right? So I was thinking he would probably add the other knight eventually, and I'd be in pretty big trouble. So I decided to go so bishop to e5, attacking the queen, and queen to e3. So here the threat would be to have the queen come in here and put a lot of pressure on the king, blocking off the diagonal here. And I desperately needed to get my pieces into the defense. So the best move that I thought of was f5 to open up the diagonal for the bishop to retreat if needed. And it was a pawn that I needed to get rid of. That was the fastest way to create some room for my pieces to come in. So I thought that if he was to take, then there was something I could do to, perhaps bring the well, not here because he would fork me, and not here because the queen, but find a way to somehow bring my pieces into the defense. So maybe, whoops. Maybe something like this, right? And he could attack, but then I would get a chance to somehow bring my pieces slowly for defense. Okay, so now he goes queen to g5 check. So by going my pawn up, I open up the path for the queen, but that was the plan, to retreat my bishop to g7, and the next move would be to bring the queen back. So knight takes f5, threatening checkmate here. So queen goes to e5. So I am attacking the knight and defending the bishop, and because the bishop and the queen are defending each other, if he pulls something like this, like a check, and I move, then the queen is not hanging because the bishop can protect her. So he brings the other knight into the attack with knight to f4, and I offer a queen trade, queen to f6, because I'm pretty desperate right now, because I feel a lot of pressure. My pieces here are really bad. They're not doing anything at the moment. So I'm trying to exchange just to relieve the tension. So he doesn't want to do that, so he keeps the pin with queen to g4. So now I play a pretty strong move with bishop to c8, pinning the knight. So this basically forces him to exchange queens. So queen takes g7 check, queen takes g7, knight takes g7, king takes g7. So now the pressure has been relieved and I feel much better. I'm down one pawn, but it was worth it. So rook to e1, putting pressure on my e pawn. So here I'm not that comfortable with endgames, and I knew that I had to be really sharp. I wasn't really sure what to do, so rook to e8, defending the pawn. I didn't really want to advance my pawns here. For example, something like this, because I wasn't sure what was the best strategy to, and having my rook tied to the defense of the pawn here is probably not the best idea, but because it's on a light square, I could still defend with the bishop, and somehow I was thinking I would find a way to bring the other rook into the defense. So he takes the other open file with rook to d1, and so I go rook to a7. What I was thinking here is, because the only way for him to attack here is if he goes here, then my rook is defending. So the only way for him to enter my camp here is through the 7th rank, oops, sorry. So I go rook to a7. Now he goes knight to h5 check, and you know, there were some options here. I could have gone here, so that way I would attack the knight, but I didn't want him to go here and harass my rook. So I decided to go king to g6, knowing that he could return here and check, deliver check again. But that was the point. I wanted to make my king more active and get towards the center. So knight to f4 check, and king to g5. So I didn't want to block off the light squared bishop, and the idea was to perhaps later on use my pawn to defend. So he defends with g3, and so now I double the rooks. Rook to e7. You know, the idea here was to perhaps later on bring some pawns here for defense, and or eventually push towards the center, and with the double rooks, then that's a way for me to penetrate. But this pawn is quite valuable to me at the moment, so I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. So he goes h4 check, putting all his pawns on dark squares, which is good. So now he only has one pawn on the light square that I can attack. So that's good. So I go king to g4. So this is not too bad for me because you know, if eventually I get control, well, I knew that I couldn't really go here yet because he would simply deliver check here, right? But I was controlling the light squares around the pawns here, so I was okay with that. And my king was more active than his. So he goes king to g2, you know, countering me with defending the light squares. And so bishop to b7, x-raying the king. And that was the point of doubling the rooks as well, because I didn't want, you know, once I moved the bishop here, I didn't want to have the rooks on either side of the bishop and having the bishop in between. So I decided to concentrate the rooks here, and so that I could be more active with the light square bishop. And so he plays a good move with rook to e3, blockading my my e-pawn. So it now I can't really move it to have a discovered check. So rook to e5, and so the idea was just to centralize the rook to a more central, you know, more active spot. And I wanted the rooks that were close to my king, the pieces that were close to my king, to be in different colors, so the knight could not you know, have a tactical fork. So whatever was far from the king, it was okay to be on light squares. Whatever was really close to the king, I didn't want to have to be on the same colored square. So I think this is a waiting move. The position is pretty good. It's pretty equal. He goes king to g1, and I'm down a pawn, but the position is not too bad. And I feel that the bishop in this case is probably better because there's two islands here, so the bishop can go back and forth, whereas the knight has to jump. You know, it's more of a close range piece. So here I make a mistake. So you know, I didn't realize here that this was very vulnerable, and actually I think he could have he could have attacked that a long time ago, right? So this would have been pretty bad, but if he did, since my rooks are connected, I could still somehow defend. So this is my mistake. I go rook to c8, you know, probably trying to somehow penetrate his camp here, and by disconnecting my rooks, that's where the mistake is. I should have perhaps simply pushed my my pawns slowly, but I thought that was kind of slow, and I would be more aggressive with my major piece. So he goes rook to d7 with a double attack on the bishop and the pawn, and there's nothing I can do about it because if I go here to defend the pawn, then the knight is there. So I knew I was going to lose that pawn. So bishop to c6, and at this point the game is pretty much over in my mind. And so rook takes f7. So I defend the other pawn with h5, and he goes rook to g7 check, king to f5. Now he takes a pawn, so knight takes h5, rook to d8. So I think at this point my only chance is perhaps to enter his camp here. You know, maybe it's probably a mistake for me to move my pawn to h5, but you know, I knew that the position was pretty much lost at this point. So rook to g5 check, rook to e6. So I thought that, you know, he probably want to exchange, but he didn't. So he improved the position of the knight with knight to f4 check. I think he's a strong player, and at this point he's trying to deliver checks to try to isolate my king from my rook here. So I knew that his next move would probably to deliver check here to win the bishop, but I also needed to stay connected to the rook, right? So if I go this way, then it's check, then I lose the bishop, and the only other place to stay connected to the rook would be d6, because over here the knight is covering that square. So king to d6, and at this point I resigned because I didn't see how I could escape here, and you know, it wasn't like a definite win for him, but I felt that if he played perhaps rook to g6 check, I would have to move and stay connected to the bishop, and of course I couldn't go here because he would simply fork the king and the rook. So you know, d7, and then he would start pushing pawns. I'd probably find a way to get the bishop out of from the attack. He'd push some more and probably get the king to a safer place. Then he would push the other pawns, and I would somehow try to defend. Oh yeah, so this move, the g4 here would bring the other rook into the attack. So I would defend. So he would defend again, and rook to e7, and he'd probably find a way to try to exchange. I'll probably go back here because, you know, there's nothing else to do. He'd keep pushing the pawns, and then I would move around, and he'd bring the knight into the attack. Rook would have to retreat. Then he would exchange because now he has enough pieces to defend his pawns. You know, so then I eventually have to sacrifice the rook, and there's not much I can do. Just go around, right? So go back and forth, try to hold the position as best as I can. He pushes pawns, you know, delivers a couple of checks here. Queens have to lose the bishop. No, it's pretty much over. There's not much I can do. He'd probably find a way to. So now I'm stuck here. I have to stay with this pawn, and it's just a matter of time before he brings the other knight into the action. You know, forking my pawns and check, and you know, eventually just slowly queening, right? So once that's done, let's checkmate. Okay, so I hope you guys learned something from this. So for me, I learned that my end game is pretty weak, and connected rooks are really important. And I think if I was a stronger player, it could have been a draw, perhaps. But playing it through, it's probably a better learning experience than offering a draw back then when things were stable. So anyways, I hope you guys learned something from this.